Imagine running a criminal empire, sitting through therapy twice a week, and still somehow being the most emotionally unstable guy in every room you walk into. That's Tony Soprano. The man can plan a murder with total composure, then completely lose it over a joke about ice cubes. That's what makes his temper so unpredictable. You genuinely never know which version of Tony is going to show up, the calm boss playing chess, or the guy who's about to put your head through a windshield. So in this video, we're counting down every single time Tony Soprano completely lost it. Let's get into it. Number 1. Georgie and the phone. We don't even make it out of episode 2 before Tony shows us exactly who he is underneath the composed exterior. Georgie Santorelli, the bartender at the Bada Bing, is trying to work the phone and just can't stop repeating himself, saying hello over and over like he's never used one before. And Tony, who at this point we still think might just be a stressed out family man with a panic disorder, snatches the phone out of his hand and starts beating him with it. This becomes a running bit for the rest of the series, honestly. Georgie gets smacked with a big mouth Billy Bass because it reminds Tony of a dead friend. He gets pelted with ice and then beaten with the metal bucket for talking too much about watery drinks. At one point, he even catches a hit with the cash register drawer for saying something as harmless as "you gotta live for today." None of it is really about Georgie. The guy's not dangerous, he's not disloyal, he's just unlucky enough to be standing nearby whenever Tony needs somewhere to dump whatever he's feeling. What if Georgie had actually pushed back one of those times, or worse, quit and talked about it to the wrong person? A pattern of a captain repeatedly assaulting the same low-level guy for nothing is exactly the kind of loose thread that gets people asking questions they shouldn't be asking. Number 2. The rat in Maine. This one's less of a sudden blow-up and more of Tony letting Old Fury completely take over a trip that was supposed to be about his daughter. Tony's driving Meadow around New England on a college tour, one of the rare stretches of the show where he's just trying to be a normal dad, when he spots a guy from his old crew who flipped on the family years back and disappeared into witness protection. Instead of calling it in, Tony spends the rest of the day hunting the guy down personally while Meadow is off doing a campus interview a few buildings away. He finds him, and after the man tries to have both Tony and Meadow killed to save his own skin, Tony strangles him with a length of wire behind his shop. Then he casually drives back and picks up his daughter like nothing happened. What if Meadow's interview had ended 10 minutes early? What if a professor or another parent had seen her father's car parked near a crime scene an hour before the police found the body? Tony risked his daughter's safety and his own freedom, chasing a grudge that could have waited for literally anyone else on his payroll to handle. Number 3. Going after a made man over Tracy. Season 3 gives us a version of Tony's temper that's actually pointed somewhere sort of justified, and it's still reckless enough to break one of the family's most important rules. Ralph Cifaretto's been seeing a young stripper named Tracy, a girl Tony had shown some real kindness to earlier in the season. After an argument in the Bada Bing parking lot, Ralph beats her to death against a metal guardrail. When Tony finds out, he doesn't wait for a sit-down. He doesn't go through the proper channels. He attacks Ralph immediately and physically, even though Ralph is a made man, and putting your hands on a made man without permission is the exact kind of move that gets other people killed for way less. Tony gets pulled off before real damage is done, and here's the wild part: Ralph faces basically no consequences for actually murdering someone. What if one of the other guys watching had decided Tony crossed a line himself and reported it up the chain? In their world, you don't get to break the rules just because your reason feels righteous in the moment. Number 4. Picking a fight with the new guy for no reason at all. By season 4, Tony's just been shot by his own uncle and is getting back into the swing of things, desperate to prove he hasn't lost a step. His new driver, a big guy named Perry Annunziata, hasn't done anything wrong, hasn't said a word out of line, hasn't shown any disrespect. That's basically why Tony picks a fight with him. Following some old advice about always taking on the biggest guy in the room, Tony provokes Perry into throwing hands right there at Satrial's, purely to prove to himself and everyone watching that he's still the toughest guy in the building. He wins, but ends up on the ground vomiting afterward, and somehow he's smiling through it, completely satisfied with himself. What if Perry had actually seriously hurt him, or worse, decided that working for a boss who randomly assaults his own driver wasn't worth the paycheck and started talking to people he shouldn't? Tony risked his own health and a valuable guy's loyalty just to soothe his ego after getting shot. Number 5. The belt and the assemblyman. This is maybe the pettiest entry on this whole list because Tony genuinely has no reason reason to be angry here. His former mistress Irina starts seeing Assemblyman Zelman, a corrupt politician Tony's been doing business with. Zelman actually does the respectful thing and tells Tony directly, almost nervously asking permission. Tony says it's fine. He's the one who ended things with Irina in the first place. Weeks later though, Tony's driving alone, an old song comes on the radio, and something in him just snaps loose. He drives straight to Irina's apartment, finds Zelman there, and beats him half naked with his own belt while Irina watches, unable to do anything about it. Zelman didn't cross him. He asked permission and got it. What if Zelman had gone to the hospital and told a doctor exactly who did this to him and why? A sitting assemblyman with visible belt marks and a story involving a mob boss is not the kind of thing that stays quiet forever. Number 6. The fight that finally kills Ralph. Everyone remembers this one because it's the bloodiest fight in the whole series. Tony's prized racehorse dies in a stable fire that looks less like an accident the longer he thinks about it, and he becomes convinced Ralph deliberately set it for the insurance money. When he confronts him in the kitchen, Ralph doesn't really deny it, he just snaps back that it was only an animal, in the same breath as complaining about his own kid's hospital bills. That's the spark. It turns into a brutal brawl across the kitchen floor that ends with Tony strangling Ralph to death with his bare hands, and Christopher having to help dispose of the body while high on heroin. Here's the thing though, Tony had told Polly earlier that same season nobody touches Ralph without permission from above. He breaks his own rule in the most extreme way possible over a horse, months after doing almost nothing when Ralph actually killed a person. What if Ralph's crew had noticed him missing sooner and started asking Tony pointed questions before the body was disposed of? A boss caught personally strangling one of his own captains over livestock is not a story that helps anyone's authority. Number 7. The beating that starts a war. This is the last one, and it might be the most consequential. A low-level guy connected to a rival family spots Meadow on a date and harasses her with lewd comments that leave her visibly shaken. When she tells her father, Tony doesn't call a meeting. He doesn't go through the usual middleman for disputes between families. He drives straight to the guy's restaurant, pistol whips him in front of witnesses, and finishes by curb stomping his teeth out on a wooden step. Nobody's arguing the guy didn't have it coming, but the way Tony delivers it, personally, publicly, completely unauthorized, is what turns it from protecting his daughter into a full-blown act of temper. It shatters the fragile peace between the two families and kicks off the war that basically consumes the rest of the series. What if Tony had let it go through the proper channels instead of handling it himself in front of witnesses? He gets one scene of feeling like a good father, and everyone around him spends the rest of the show paying for it. So there you have it. 7 times Tony Soprano's temper nearly cost him everything. And honestly, that might be underselling it, because at least one of these directly leads to the war that ends the entire series. What's wild is that none of these are calculated moves. These are the moments where Tony stops thinking 2 steps ahead and just reacts, and someone else always ends up paying for it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, drop a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.